Week 4 was the first big week on the schedule in the Pioneer League as the full in-conference schedule got underway. Morehead State defeated Dayton in a tight one, 34-28. Drake were winners over Valpo, 38-13. Carlos Merritt had a big day for Campbell on defense, recording 9 tackles and 2 interceptions, including returning 1 for a touchdown in a 49-21 win over Stetson. San Diego got a big win over Butler, 38-17, with QB Anthony Lawrence going 26 for 39 for 367 yards and 5 touchdowns. And Jacksonville got a huge win over Marist in a shootout, 44-37. There's still a large logjam at the top of the standings, with Campbell, Drake, Morehead State, and San Diego all at 2-2 and 1-0 in the conference, going into a big Week 5 of conference play. Coming up this week in the Pioneer League, there will be several big matchups to watch, including San Diego traveling to Dayton to take on the Flyers, and Butler hosting Drake. But 2 big matchups will be the focal point of the weekend. First, the 2-2 Red Foxes of Marist will travel to take on the Davidson Wildcats in their conference season opener in Ohio. And finally, the Morehead State Eagles will travel to take on the Fighting Camels of Campbell, with both teams looking to go 2-0 in conference play and take a hold of the top of the standings. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm David Hassagen.
After a 3-2 week, the Big South saw 4 of its 6 teams receive top 25 votes, with Liberty coming in ranked number 22. 5 teams are in action this Saturday, with 4 looking to protect their home field. 1 hosts a Division II opponent, and 1 has a defender on milestone watch, and the Big South gets another shot at knocking off an undefeated and top 10 ranked opponent. The Gardner-Webb Runnin' Bulldogs head into their bye week winless after losing on the road at Wofford last weekend. In a back-and-forth contest, the number 9 ranked Terriers survived a close one, 27-24, as the Runnin' Bulldogs' upset attempt came up just short, dropping their record to 0-4. The good news for Gardner-Webb is that there were some positives to come out of this game, as preseason Offensive Player of the Year Tyrell Maxwell completed a season-best 20 of 29 passes for 171 yards and 2 scores. He also tallied 44 yards on 8 carries. The bulk of Maxwell's work in the passing game, including both his touchdowns, came in the second half. On the other side of the ball, redshirt senior strong safety Thomas Adams had a career day and earned himself Big South Defensive Player of the Week honors. He finished with a personal best 14 tackles, including 10 solo, and had a 53-yard fumble return for a touchdown in the loss. Gardner-Webb returns to action on October 7th when they host Shorter University and try to avoid their first 0-5 start since 2012. The Presbyterian Blue Hose needed a come-from-behind victory to defeat the NAIA's 19th-ranked Cumberland University last Saturday. After falling behind early in the second half, the Blue Hose tied the game at 20 when Brett Norton connected on a 47-yard field goal at the end of the third, and won it when Deshaun Davis found the end zone on a 49-yard run in the fourth, giving Presbyterian their second straight win and getting them back to 500 after starting 0-2. The Blue Hose play their 4th of 7 straight at home this Saturday when they host the number 7 ranked Wofford Terriers. The Terriers will be the second top 15 opponent to come to Bailey Memorial Stadium this season. The first was the Citadel, back on September 9th. Then ranked 14th, the Bulldogs handed the Blue Hose a 48-7 defeat. If Presbyterian wants a different result this time around, they're going to have to keep it close, as Wofford's 3 victories have come by a combined 5 points this season. If the Blue Hose want to pull off the upset, something Gardner-Webb was unable to do, their offense is going to have to control the clock and help keep one of the worst defenses in the FCS off the field. To control the clock, Ben Cheek needs to turn and hand the ball off to reigning Big South Freshman of the Week, Torrance Marble, whose 499 rushing yards ranked 5th in the FCS. Kennesaw State comes in with the 18th ranked defense in the FCS, and they lead the Big South with 10 total takeaways and a +5 turnover margin. They also have a 37-7 edge in points off turnovers, meaning when the defense takes the ball away, the offense capitalizes, and if the offense gives it away, the defense has been there to back them up. The Owls' offense hasn't been bad either, as they come in ranked 12th in the FCS in total rushing yards, led by junior dual-threat quarterback Chandler Burks and junior Darnell Holland, who ranked 5th and 6th in the Big South, respectively. The 2-time defending Big South champion Charleston Southern Buccaneers finally broke into the win column on Saturday and got first-year head coach Mark Tucker his first win, with a 66-0 throttling of the NAIA's Point University. The Bucks dominated on both sides of the ball from start to finish, as their offense racked up 620 total yards, the fourth most in school history, and their defense allowed just 98 total yards, the school's first sub-100 defensive day since 2009. The win led to the Bucks receiving top 25 votes, but in order to crack the top 25, they're likely going to have to defeat an FCS opponent, and they have a chance to do that against the winless Mississippi Valley State Delta Devils this Saturday. If the Bucks can play with the same fire on defense they showed against Point, led by the play up front from Big South preseason Defensive Player of the Year Anthony Ellis, they will likely pick up their second straight win. As the Delta Dogs are coming into this week in FCS worst in total offense, rushing yards, and yards per game, and they are the second lowest scoring team in the country, putting just 16 total points on the scoreboard through their first 3 contests. The Monmouth Hawks needed overtime to defeat Hampton on the road last Saturday to run their record to 3-1. After allowing a game-tying touchdown with 23 seconds left, the Hawks turned to freshman running back Eric Zakori. Zakori took a handoff from Kenji Bahar 25 yards for the game-winning touchdown in the first overtime period. Zakori's efforts in the win earned him Big South Player of the Week. He totaled 9 carries, 77 yards, and 2 scores. Monmouth stays on the road this week for their 3rd of 4th straight away from home as they take on the 2-2 Bucknell Bison. The Hawks have relied on a balanced offense that has been one of the best in the Big South so far this season and should continue to do so against the Bucknell defense that has struggled in the last few weeks. Bahar's 712 passing yards, Peter Guerrerio's 394 rushing yards, and Reggie White Jr.'s 26 receptions all ranked 2nd in the Big South. And this should be the week for senior Mike Bazile to break Monmouth's career tackles record, as he is just 5 shy of the mark. Bazile is averaging over 10 stops per game for the Hawks defense this season. The Liberty Flames fell from the ranks of the unbeaten with a 31-10 loss at number 5 Jacksonville State last weekend. The loss dropped the Flames to 3-1 and dropped them 6 spots to number 22 in the most recent FCS poll. The Flames are back home to host 2-1 St. Francis University this weekend. Liberty has looked very comfortable at home this season as they come in averaging 50 points per game in their 2 wins at Williams Stadium in 2017. The Flames went from scoring over 40 points in their first 3 games to only putting up 10 in the loss to the Gamecocks. However, it didn't hurt their offensive statistics. Liberty has the 5th best offense in the FCS, thanks in large part to the 4th-ranked air attack. Sophomore quarterback Stephen Calvert ranks 4th in the nation in passing yards, 3rd in completions, and 2nd in touchdown passes. He is helped out by the best group of receivers in the Big South, sophomore Antonio Gandy Golden and juniors BJ Faro and Damian King. The trio ranks 1, 2, and 3 respectively in receiving yards in the Big South, and Gandy Golden's 499 yards ranks him 3rd nationally. If Liberty is going to get back in the win column this week, look for a ton of points and a monster day from Calvert. Come back next week for results of each game and more. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Frank LaSala.
Welcome to Week 5, as all 10 teams are in action in conference play, and 4 out of 5 games will feature at least one ranked team, including a top 10 matchup. So let's start off by heading to Illinois State, where the number 12 Redbirds, who are coming off their first conference win of the season, host Indiana State. The Redbirds look to continue their offensive surge as they scored 123 points in games so far this season behind quarterback Jake Colby's 724 yards and 4 TDs and their 2-headed pronged running attack of Smith and Robinson, who have combined for 423 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. The Sycamores defense, which has given up 106 points, will certainly have their hands full, but if they can get some stops, things should set up well for their offense, who have found their new quarterback in Cade Sparks, who had 405 yards against a very tough Liberty team, and will be counting on their workhorse running back Lamont Booker to eat up the clock and get some tough yards to keep the Redbird offense off the field. Now to North Dakota State, where the number 2 Bison hosts Missouri State. The Bison's offense has nothing short of spectacular so far this season, scoring 156 points, which was 1 point off the FCS record for most points in the first 3 games of the season. Quarterback Easton Stick and his 3-headed running attack of Anderson, Dunn, and Brooks have been unstoppable as they have combined for 16 touchdowns. The Bears' defense, led by Jared Rishour, who has 3 interceptions, had better be on top of their game, or this could be out of hand early. On offense, the Bears will have to once again count on running back Kalen Crowder to keep the Bison defense, which ranks #1 in total defense, honest, so quarterback Peyton Hustler can find his favorite target, wide receiver Malik Earl, and put up some points. Now let's head out to Southern Illinois, where the surprising Salukis host Northern Iowa. The Salukis offense, led by quarterback Sam Straub, have scored 121 points, which has set them up well against the Panthers defense that has given up 108 points. But they will have to watch out for Panthers linebacker Jared Farley, as he will be swarming around the field making tackles all day. The Panthers offense, led by quarterback Eli Dunn, and his 868 yards and 8 TDs will get their opportunities to score against a young Salukis defense, which is starting to come together, but Dunn has to keep his interceptions to a minimum as he's thrown 6 already, and the offensive line has to be a lot better as they've given up 6 sacks. To Western Illinois, where the #13 Leathernecks host #10 South Dakota, and what will be a high-scoring battle between 2 3-0 teams. The game will feature 2 of the top 6 FCS passing efficiency quarterbacks in Coyotes Chris Strevler and Leathernecks Sean McGuire. Strevler has been the jack of all trades for the Coyotes this year, behind his 840 yards passing and 7 TDs to go along with his 226 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns. Their offense will go as far as Strevler can take them. The Leathernecks will have to count on their best defensive player, linebacker Brett Taylor, who has either led or tied the team in tackles for the last 8 games, to spy on Strevler all day to make sure that when he starts running, he won't be able to break free. The Leathernecks quarterback Sean McGuire, who has 621 yards and 5 touchdowns, has looked great this season. He was spectacular last week with his 3 touchdown passing and his 1 receiving touchdown. The Coyotes secondary of Powell, Lewis, and Collins Jr. will be tested from the start, as McGuire loves to spread the ball around, as 10 different receivers have a catch this season. This game will come down to whoever has the ball last. And in the game of the week, #6 Youngstown State hosts #4 South Dakota State in a game of offense versus defense. The Jackrabbits bring in their high-flying #4 FCS-ranked offense, led by quarterback Tyron Christian, tight end Dallas Goedert, and Missouri Valley Football Conference all-time leading receiver Jake Winicky, who have combined for 16 touchdowns this season. They will face a Penguin Nation defense that has given up 1 touchdown in the last 9 quarters of play. This will be their toughest challenge of the season, though, as they have to keep their eye on Christian, who can run just as well as he can pass. If they can't contain him, Penguin Nation will have to rely on their 3-headed monster running game, led by McCaster, Alessi, and Turner, who have racked up 278 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. If the Jackrabbits decide to put 8 men in the box to contain the running game, the game could come down to quarterback Hunter Wells or Nathan May's arm. This game has the potential to be a preview of a playoff matchup in December. For the Missouri Valley Football Conference, I'm Brian Sullivan.
Just when we thought we knew everything about not only this conference, but FCS football, the script got flipped. In the opening week of conference play in the CAA, we had some of the best games of the season. We also saw the top 25 get shaken up quite a bit. We're going to start this off with the University of New Hampshire, who grinded out a tough 28-14 victory over a gritty Rhode Island team. The star of this game was quarterback Trevor Knight, who threw for his career best 420 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Rams hung in there, pulling within 1 point in the 4th quarter before the Wildcats shut the door. After their big bounce-back victory, New Hampshire will take on Bryant, who's coming off a shootout victory over Fordham. URI got a great performance out of Aaron Parker, who had 112 receiving yards and a touchdown. They'll look for their 2nd win of the season next week against Brown, who was blown out by Harvard. Stony Brook came out on top of another tough game, beating Towson 25-17. Quarterback Joe Carbone had a great day, throwing for 240 yards and 2 touchdowns. Towson was able to pull within 2 points in the 3rd quarter before kicker Alex Lekansky put the nail in the coffin, kicking 2 field goals in the fourth quarter. Stony Brook will look to keep it rolling next week, taking on William and Mary, who will be coming off of a bye. Towson will have to bounce back quickly because they have the tough task of an angry Villanova next week. Speaking of Villanova, they lost a tough defensive battle in an upset loss to unranked Albany, 19-10. With a 3-3 tie late in the fourth, Carl Mofor punched in a go-ahead touchdown for the Great Danes. That was answered at the very end of the game when Aaron Forbes was able to cross the goal line for Villanova. In overtime, Eli Menser made a house call after picking up a fumble and returning it 80 yards and sealing the victory. Jeff Steeb led the Villanova defense with 14 tackles as the defense showed out in that tough loss. The formerly 7th-ranked Wildcats will look to bounce back against Towson, as mentioned before. Albany's defense was led by Malachi Hoskins, who had 6 tackles, 3.5 for a loss and a forced fumble. They will take on Elon next week. Sticking with Elon and upsets, the Phoenix took down the formerly 8th-ranked Richmond Spiders. Malcolm Summers was the star of this game, rushing for 294 yards. After tying it with a touchdown pass to Matt Foster, Owen Johnson was able to give the Phoenix the lead for good, drilling a 32-yard field goal. That's now back-to-back wins over ranked opponents for Elon. The Phoenix will look to make it 4 in a row next week in a battle of the conference Cinderellas. Kyle Lauletta, outside of his 2 interceptions, had another strong showing with 497 yards and 3 touchdowns for Richmond. They will head into a much-needed bye before taking on Albany. And in our final game, the top-ranked James Madison Dukes took down the Maine Black Bears 28-10. While this may look like an easy win from a statistical standpoint, Maine actually took a 10-7 lead in the third quarter before Brian Shore threw the go-ahead touchdown to David Eldridge and never looked back. Brian Shore threw for 4 total touchdowns. James Madison will look to tie the CAA record with 17 straight wins as they take on Delaware, who's coming off of a bye. Maine wasted a huge game from Josh Mack, who had himself a day, rushing for 144 yards and a touchdown. They'll need another performance like that from Mack because they'll be taking on University of Central Florida, who hammered Maryland 38-10. With your FCS Whiparound, I'm Ryan Griffith. Good luck to all the CAA teams this weekend.
The biggest game of the opening weekend of conference play saw number 20 ranked Tennessee State travel in-state to Martin to take on the 24th ranked Skyhawks. Unfortunately for the visiting Tigers, UT Martin jumped out to a 24-0 lead en route to a 31-16 victory. A battle of the OVC's top 2 defenses in not only yards, but scoring as well, this game did not disappoint. For UT Martin, the offense was paced by running back Ladarius Galloway, who carried 25 times for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. Troy Cook had an efficient day at quarterback, going 20 of 32 for 140 yards and a touchdown to Kalon Weathers. Tennessee State quarterback Treon Harris was 10 of 18 for 118 yards and had a rushing touchdown, but overall the running game for TSU was stymied by the UT Martin defense, led by safety Tay Martin, who had 13 tackles. UT Martin also scored on a block punt return for a touchdown for the first time since 2010, only to be answered on the next play by a 96-yard Devon Johnson kickoff return for a touchdown for Tennessee State. The Tigers look to get back to their winning ways next week at home against Eastern Illinois, while the now number 18 ranked UT Martin Skyhawks look to go 2-0 in the Sergeant York Trophy Series as they will visit the Governors of Austin Peay State University. In a matchup of teams looking for their first victory of the young season, Eastern Kentucky hosted Tennessee Tech this past Saturday and eked out a 24-21 victory over the Golden Eagles. After jumping out to a 10-0 halftime lead, thanks to an L.J. Scott touchdown and a 51-yard field goal by Lucas Williams, the EKU defense made the first of 2 big stops during the game, halting the Golden Eagles on a 4th down attempt and allowing the Colonel offense to take over. Tim Boyle found his favorite receiver Ryan Marcus for a touchdown to open up a 17-0 advantage. From there, though, the Tennessee Tech offense came alive. Andre Sale, who would finish the day with over 300 yards passing, and Dantes Bird, who would account for 169 of those yards, helped bring the Golden Eagles back to within 3 points of the Colonels with 1 minute, 23 seconds left. Eastern Kentucky would make its second big defensive stand of the day, though, making 2 tackles for a loss and forcing 2 false start penalties, not allowing the Golden Eagles to cross the 50 and closing out the game. Kobe Grace led that Eastern Kentucky defense with 7 tackles, an interception, a forced fumble, and 2 fumble recoveries. Those accomplishments earned him my Defensive Player of the Week award. Grace only had to look across the line of scrimmage to find the Offensive Player of the Week, as his 9 receptions for 169 yards and a touchdown earned Dantes Bird the honor. Next week, EKU takes its 1-0 conference record to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, to take on Southeast Missouri State, while Tennessee Tech stays home and looks to be the first OVC team in 24 tries to beat Jacksonville State. Speaking of long OVC streaks, for the second straight weekend, Austin Peay snapped a double-digit losing streak. This time, they halted their 21-game OVC losing streak by going to Murray, Kentucky, and beating the Murray State Racers 27-7. In a game that, going in, had the top 2 scoring offenses in the OVC going head-to-head, it was the Governor's offense that lived up to the billing. The Austin Peay defense stymied the Racer offense, limiting them for the game to 88 yards of total offense on 55 plays. Malik Boynton led the defensive effort with 7 tackles, and Gunnar Scalado continued his impressive season with an interception and 6 tackles for the Governors. Despite the efforts of Lamont Crittenden, who had 11 tackles and a fumble recovery for the Murray State defense, Javon Cray again led the APSU offense with 103 yards rushing, 84 yards passing, and 2 total touchdowns. The Governors will look to make it 2 in a row in the OVC as they stay home and take on the Skyhawks of UT Martin, while Murray State will go out of conference and take on the defending Heisman Trophy winner in Lamar Jackson in Louisville. Redshirt freshman Scotty Gilkey Jr. stepped in for the injured Mitch Kimball at quarterback for Eastern Illinois and paced the Panther offense, rushing 26 times for 98 yards with a touchdown and throwing for 142 yards and 2 more scores, both going to Alexander Hollins, who had 7 total catches for 118 yards. All of this despite the efforts of Kendall Donnerson, who had a monster game for the Redhawks defense, garnering 12 tackles, including 1 for a safety. Thanks to that defense, Southeast Missouri got the ball with 3 minutes left at its own 30 with a chance to drive for the potential winning touchdown and made it all the way to the EIU 16-yard line, where Jesse Hoskett would be pressured into his 2nd interception of the day, this one by Bradley Dewberry to seal the victory for the home side. Next week, Eastern Illinois goes on the road and takes on Tennessee State, while Southeast Missouri looks for its first conference win against the Eastern Kentucky Colonels at home. It was the home opener for the Gamecocks, although the record crowd of 23,944 at Burgess Snow Field would have to wait an extra hour for the game to begin, thanks to a lightning scare. It didn't help ignite the Flames' offense, though, as the Gamecock defense held a Liberty team that was averaging 536 yards per game and 49 points per game to 316 and 10 in a dominating 31-10 victory. It took a quarter for the JSU offense to get going, but once it did, it would get contributions from everywhere. Bryant Horn threw for 181 yards and a touchdown. Rock Thomas ran for 87 and 2 scores. Backup quarterback Kendrick Doss, a junior, came in and ran the ball 3 times for 32 yards and a touchdown, his first as a college quarterback. Trey Berry had an 80-yard touchdown catch, JSU's longest in 3 years. It was a complete team effort by the Gamecocks as they defeated their second top 20 opponent in the first 5 games of the season. Coach Grass and the Gamecocks begin the conference portion of their schedule next week as they travel to Tennessee Tech to take on the Golden Eagles. Moving up north a bit, let's look at what happened in the Northeast Conference this weekend. Central Connecticut State got its first win of the season, defeating Walsh University by a score of 57-6 in New Britain, Connecticut on Saturday. Finding themselves down 3-0 midway through the first quarter, the Blue Devils ripped off 5 straight touchdowns to take control of the game. Quarterback Jake Dolagala ran for a touchdown and threw a 62-yard score to Courtney Rush on the day, but the offense was led by running back Cameron Nash, who carried the ball 14 times for 109 yards and 2 scores. The Blue Devils open up Northeast Conference play next week when they travel to Sacred Heart to take on the Pioneers. Speaking of those Pioneers, twice this past Saturday they came back from double-digit deficits, one 17-0, the other 31-17, only to see a 46-yard field goal at the buzzer hand them their second loss this season, this time to Bucknell of the Patriot League. The offense had plenty of stars for Sacred Heart, with quarterback Kevin Duke finishing the day 14 of 29 for 244 yards and a touchdown, but the defense would really key the comebacks. 4 players would accumulate 10-plus tackles on the day, including Kevin Barry, who would add a 60-yard interception return for a touchdown and earn himself my Northeast Conference Defensive Player of the Week honors. Sacred Heart struggled on 3rd and 4th down in the game, going a combined 3 of 16. They'll look to get back on track when they host Central Connecticut next week. The Bryant Bulldogs continued their offensive assault on the FCS this year, defeating the Fordham Rams 45-40 on Saturday. Quarterback Price Wilson, who came into the game with 1,026 yards passing, added 393 to that total against Fordham, with 2 touchdowns to boot. But the Offensive Player of the Week honors goes to his teammate Isaac McCray, who ran 21 times for 123 yards and 2 scores against the Rams. The Bulldogs as a team ran 90 plays and set a school record with 608 yards of total offense during homecoming weekend in Smithfield. Thomas Costigan was again the defensive star for the Bulldogs as he amassed 10 tackles, a sack, and an interception. He and his teammates will look to continue winning as they travel north to take on New Hampshire next weekend. Wagner took on Western Michigan this past Saturday, an FBS team just 8 months removed from playing in the Cotton Bowl. Western Michigan defeated the Seahawks 49-14. Ryan Fultz ran the ball 19 times for 61 yards and a touchdown, helping Wagner to control the ball for over 31 minutes of game time. But 3rd down was the major difference in this game, as Wagner was only 2 of 11, while Western Michigan was successful on 8 out of 10 chances. Next week, Wagner stays home and looks to get back in the winning column as they take on Lehigh. For the FCS Whiparound, I'm Luke Jackson.
Big weekend in the Ivy League last week as teams opened up conference play. Cornell went on the road to face Yale in search of their first win of the season. Their trip to Connecticut didn't exactly go as planned, as the Bulldogs were more than ready to take on the Big Red. Leading the way for the Bulldogs was running back tandem of Zane Dudek and Deshaun Salter, who combined for 316 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns en route to a 49-24 victory over Cornell. Next week, Yale travels out to the Big Apple to take on 1-3 Fordham, and Cornell goes back home to prepare for their home opener against 1-3 Colgate. The other in-conference matchup featured Harvard welcoming in Brown for their home opener, trying to get their first win of the season. The Crimson's quarterback Jake Smith became the first quarterback to start as a freshman for Harvard since 2001, where the last player to do so was 13-year NFL vet Ryan Fitzpatrick. You could say his debut went well as the Crimson took care of the Brown handily, beating them by a score of 45-28 and notching their first win of the season. Next week, Harvard travels to the capital to take on 1-2 Georgetown, and the Browns head home to take on a 1-3 Rhode Island Rams team. The most interesting of the non-conference matchups was the bout between Dartmouth Big Green and the 25th ranked Holy Cross at home in New Hampshire. This game needed extra time to decide a winner. Dartmouth got on the board first in OT as quarterback Jack Hennigan hit Steven Johnson, who took the ball in for a 10-yard score to give the Big Green a 27-20 lead. Holy Cross would respond with a touchdown of their own, making it 27-26, but failed to convert on a 2-point conversion to win the game, sealing a 27-26 victory for Dartmouth. Next week, Dartmouth goes on the road to take on 2-0 Penn in what will be both teams' first in-conference games. Staying with Penn, they traveled to Bethlehem to take on Lehigh last week as they found themselves in a high-scoring shootout. Unlike most shootouts, though, this game featured a heavy dose of the run game, as the Quakers running back Kerrigan Brooks rushed for 268 yards and 3 touchdowns and completed his only passing attempt of the day to defensive lineman David Rislick for a touchdown. Brooks' 4 scores were enough to lead Penn to a 65-47 victory over Lehigh as they look to continue their winning ways next week against Dartmouth. Princeton went on the road last week for the first time this year to take on the Lafayette Leopards in Easton. The Tigers made relatively quick work of the 0-4 Leopards as they scored 21 points in the second quarter and never looked back on their way to a 38-17 victory. They were led by quarterback Chad Knopf, who completed 31 of his 41 passing attempts for 256 yards and 3 scores. The Tigers look to make it 7 wins in a row dating back to last season as they take on 2-0 conference rival Columbia next week in Jersey. Finally, Columbia took on Georgetown last week at home as they tried to continue their winning ways. The Lions made this one look easy as they scored 28 points before surrendering their first score of the game in the fourth quarter. Columbia was led by quarterback Anders Hill, who threw for a career-high 4 touchdowns, helping the Lions secure a 35-14 victory over the Hoyas. Next week, the Lions travel to Jersey to try and put an end to Princeton's aforementioned win streak. That's it for our Ivy League recap. I'm Ian Gridley for Football Game Plan's FCS Whiparound. I'll see you next week.
Last week was tough for Patriot League teams as they went a combined 1-6. Lehigh lost to Penn 65-47 at home. Fordham lost to Bryant 45-40. Colgate got taken down by Furman 45-14. Columbia beat down Georgetown 35-14. Bucknell had the win 35-31 over Sacred Heart. John Burdick kicked the game-winning 46-yard field goal with 2 seconds left to lead the Bison to victory. Joey DeFloria was the star of the game with 2 rushing TDs for Bucknell. Princeton took down Lafayette 38-17, and number 25 Holy Cross lost in overtime on a missed extra point 27-26. Dartmouth blocked the go-ahead extra point to force overtime, and then they stopped Holy Cross on the 2-point conversion in overtime to seal the game from the Crusaders. Let's take a look at the standings. Holy Cross is 2-2, 1-0 in the conference. Bucknell joins them at 2-2, but 0-1 in the conference. None of the other teams have played conference games yet. Georgetown is 1-2, Fordham and Colgate 1-3 each, and Lehigh and Lafayette down at 0-4. Lafayette heads to Fitton Field to visit the Holy Cross Crusaders at 1:05 p.m. This is the Leopards' first game on grass since 2015 at the same venue, so it might take some time for them to get adjusted early on. Leopards freshman quarterback Sean O'Malley has continued to impress since his debut, receiving 2 Patriot League Rookie of the Week honors already this season. He's completed passes to at least 7 different targets in all 4 games, so I expect him to keep up the good work in this one. Holy Cross was oh so close to beating a good FBS team last week, and the Crusaders will do their part to make this a high-scoring affair with the work of star quarterback Peter Pujols. The Colgate Raiders hit the road to face Ivy League opponent Cornell at 1:30 p.m. Cornell is the final FCS team to play a home game, and it will be rewarded with each of the next 5 games being at home. The Central New York rivals will be meeting for the 99th time, with Cornell only leading the all-time series by 3 wins. Last year might have been the best battle in the whole series, with Cornell mounting a furious rally to come back and win 39-38 on the road at the end. If that game is any indication of what we're in store for, look out. For the second time in 4 years, the Georgetown Hoyas host Harvard at RFK Stadium. RFK Stadium is named after Harvard grad Robert F. Kennedy, so this game has a little sentimental value to both teams. Georgetown lost big last week, and they need to bounce back quickly before they fall into a dark spell like last season. The teams had never played each other before 2014, but this will be their 4th straight year meeting. The Hoyas, though, have never won against Harvard, being outscored 110-20 over those games. Patriot League rival Monmouth travels to Bucknell to take on the Bison at 6 p.m. Monmouth is already playing their 3rd game against Patriot League foes this season, and they always seem to put up a great fight. Bucknell is tied atop the standings for now in the conference, and they need to stay focused for this primetime matchup against a tough opponent. The Fordham Rams look to get back on track as they host Yale at 6 p.m. Quarterback Kevin Anderson was the Patriot League Offensive Player of the Week for his performance in the Rams' loss last week. A few of the big teams have bad records through 4 weeks, but don't think they can't redeem themselves when conference play starts up next weekend. The winner of the conference is only decided from the results of those games. Last year, Fordham had a big win over Ivy League foe Penn, so don't be surprised if they pull the upset here as well. Defending Patriot League champions Lehigh head to Wagner at 6 p.m. The Mountain Hawks are first in the Patriot League in total offense, and they'll be looking to prove they belong with the elite, even though they're 0-4 so far. Lehigh has only gone winless in their non-conference schedule 1 time since the formation of the Patriot League in 1986, so they will be desperate to get a win here. Quarterback Brad Mays will need a repeat of his 444-yard, 4-touchdown explosion last weekend to get this team back on track. For the Patriot League on the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Chris Victel.